Welcome to another edition of a briefing, a federal briefing on mobility and access. With us, we have an esteemed panel. We'll start with you, Beth.
I'm Beth Osborne. I'm the Director of Transportation for America.
Keith.
Keith Benjamin, Head of Traffic and Transportation for the City of Charleston, and also on the board of our Aviation Authority and Transit Authority.
And my colleague, Martha.
Martha Oskowski, the coordinator of the Funder Collaborative on Mobility and Access.
So each week we give you 5 or 3 or 2 quick hits on what happened in the last week, what you should be paying attention to. We'll start with Beth.
There are 2 things that happened up here in Washington, D.C. One is the House passed an infrastructure package, very, very large infrastructure package that included funding for transportation. That was the transportation reauthorization package passed by the House T&I committee. Water infrastructure, housing, and broadband, and others. It is unlikely to go any further. It was really a statement bill by the House. The second thing that happened was the House Select Committee on Climate released a plan for how to address climate across our entire economy. That was the first affirmative statement I have seen about the role of transportation infrastructure, the way we build our communities and the role it plays, that I've seen come out of Congress.
Great. So Keith, thank you for joining us. We need a perspective that's outside the Beltway, and that's why we've asked you to join us. Give us your perspective on quick hits on what you see happening.
Yeah, thank y'all for having me, and it's good to talk to folk home away from home. I think for us locally, we're constantly thinking about how we solve problems, and for us here in the South, it takes a lot of collaboration just because of the complexity of transportation decision making. And so for us, just a couple things for us. One is that just one size doesn't fit all. I think one of the things that you see in the national discourse is us holding up communities and cities that might have certain things in alignment that might not be congruent with small mid-sized cities when it comes to transportation decision making, transportation funding, and transportation implementation. And so how do we have a more holistic conversation when it comes to how to make transportation better for all, but understand what that takes from city to city, from region to region, state to state. The other thing is that how are we thinking about transportation at the intersections? How are we holding up transportation as a common denominator for a lot of our other conversations? And so we've been doing a lot of that here because affordable housing is a massive need for us here. Resiliency is a massive need for us. We have 80 days of sunny day flooding, currently in negotiations with our Army Corps about barrier structures that might need to be around certain areas of our city in the future. And then the other thing is that how are we thinking differently, dare I say revolutionary, about design standards and what occurs in our public right-of-way. It's not just enough to make sure that one mode of transportation is able to get safely from point A to point B. We should, at a baseline, be in agreement that no matter what mode of transportation somebody is using or has no choice but to use, that they're safe within the public right-of-way and making sure that that's a priority.
Great.
It's crazy
Martha,
that's a revolutionary statement.
Yeah. Martha, did you have anything you wanted to add from what your perspective in the Rockies?
I actually think that the issues that Keith raises are the norm rather than the exception. You know, that we have some progressive big cities that are well staffed, that are really pushing the envelope. But most places are more like Charleston than they are like really advanced, sophisticated cities in terms of land use, in terms of funding, in terms of decision making. So I think this is a really relevant conversation to have. And to me, it ties into you know, the need that we are focusing, you know, with Beth, we've been focusing on, you know, the little improvements that went into the House bill. But against this backdrop that how we currently fund transportation, how we deliver those transportation dollars it's just broken. Whether you look at it through a climate lens, whether you look at it through a safety lens, whether you look at it through an equity lens, it's, you know, incremental. To me, incremental is not enough, that we really need to transform the whole thing.
What will it take to do that? I'll ask our panelists, what do you think it'll take to raise that up so that the transit and mobility industrial complex doesn't just repeat the same systemic challenges or iterate the same systemic problems that are often inequitable? What I ask both of our panelists, what do you think about that? What will it take?
I mean, I definitely have my opinions. One, there has to be a recognition that every transportation project is not a good thing. And that is a truly unacceptable statement to a lot of people, particularly at the federal level, but I'm afraid also at the state level. The second thing is that we have to get out of the and mindset. There's a notion that if we provide some tiny bit of money to fix the damage done by the overall program, that somehow discounts the incredible damage we continue to do. And there's just not an understanding right now that the problems in our existing system are the same problems of the past. We just have not updated this program. And you know, while we might not be as out in people's faces about wanting to clear neighborhoods of color with our highways, we're still creating the same damage we did to those neighborhoods when we talked about it outright.
Right. Keith, from your perspective at the local government level, and you've had experience regional-wide and nationally, where are the leverage points or messages that we need to work on delivering to elected officials who often can decide how federal dollars are deployed?
One of the things I think is how we talk about these issues and who's talking about them. You know, when a bike advocacy group walks into my office, I already know what they're going to be asking me for, what they're going to be looking for, and otherwise. But when a health organization, when a faith organization, when a social justice organization walks in and starts contextualizing these issues as well, it resonates in a different way. It makes it clear why this makes sense and its importance. And a lot of times, when the conversations about how we build our communities come up, you know, we focus in on the education, we focus in on the health, we focus in on the criminal justice, all of which are very important areas. But if you can't get safely from point A to point B, those other things ring hollow, right? There's some amazing work from the active living research where they looked at the school performance of kids based on how they got from home to school. And for those kids who had to go along broken sidewalks or through abandoned homes or crime and violence or whatever those things are, their performance in the classroom, math and reading wise, was at a lower level than somebody else, right? So how do we narrate our conversations around placemaking in a way where it resonates even in spaces that might be tangential to transportation, right? I think that opens in a significant way of how we contextualize it, how it makes sense for folk, and how we raise the level of importance. I think too many times transportation is seen so utilitarian and not necessarily fluid or dare I say artistic. Mm-hmm. And then we miss out on being able to allow people to bring a different set of context to it, and make it resonate in such a way where the folk who are talking about it, folk who want to engage in it are much different there. I think there's also a need to think about equity in a way that is doesn't just hit the conversations, doesn't just hit the advocacy, but hits the bottom line. I think we've done a good job of talking about equity, you know, in terms of who's around the table and who our stakeholders are and all those things. But let's talk about the on-call contracts. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about our procurement policies. Let's talk about where folk are being hired to actually execute on these. Who's a part of the process of building out these communities too? I think we have to be okay with what those challenging factors are, what that looks like, and how we're building folk in those ways. So I think I'll stop there, but I think those two pieces play a significant role.
It feels like there's an emergence of a wider set of people who have always been toiling in the fields, but are now getting a higher degree of attention. Destiny Thomas, Tamika Butler, and others. How does a local government find a way to engage people of color in the planning process and the implementation process? Is the system set up in a way that it's difficult for a wider set of people to be part of the solution?
I don't know if I have an answer to that question, because I myself am a byproduct of somebody speaking up on my behalf to occupy space. Right? If the Black man with a little bit of power and influence hadn't said my name in the right room, I wouldn't be sitting in this position. Right? I also don't necessarily bring the stereotypical requirements to occupy the space either. Right?
Yeah.
The room was made for me. And so I think for those of us who have been given such opportunities, you come in with a sense of humility about how you are, every door you run into, cracking that for who's next. I think when you aren't conscious of that, it's very easy to just completely dismiss it. You know, I mentioned on-call contracts earlier,
right?
Because I came in, all of my on-calls weren't indicative of the diversity, both of experience of what they were bringing to the table and what we would need to be able to transition the department in a way that I've been asked to by our mayor and our council. And so we needed to rearrange things, right? We needed to hit that bottom line, not just make a special advisory group or, do some TED Talks and go talk to the community. No,
right.
Who's going to be around the decision-making table to dictate what community looks like? I think that's a different shift. And I think we've done a lot of kind of put my arm around you and, I appreciate what you're saying and, we'll take that in consideration. It's very different when you move furniture and power and position in such a way where folk not only are having their say, but they own a door, right? This is a different position than me, right? It's different to be knocking on the door than owning the door.
Right.
Your dick is different. Your ability to command space, your ability to bring a collection of people together to address issues and concerns it's just a completely different approach. And so I think the challenge there is not just, wow, great what that individual said, great what they brought to the table, great what they triggered in us to shift and change. It's also about how are we not just making room, but stepping to the side. And as somebody who's replaced someone who was in position for 3 decades, both because of the mayor and our council, and the Black man who was in the room at the right time, space was made for me to be able to occupy the space, to even be qualified enough to be able to even have such a conversation.
Yeah, it feels that the progressive governments that are trying to move forward, put their shoulder into the work, are moving from beyond community engagement to community empowerment. And it feels, to the extent that the decisions that are made are from an empowered community, will be more complete and more meaningful than simply community engagement, which is a nod to involvement, but not necessarily an empowerment and involvement.
I would hope so. And I was going to say before that the way we do community engagement is often community lecture, where the agency shows up and explains why they've come to the only logical conclusion and then answered your questions about why it was right. And that in and of itself it's just not engagement. And I hear that a lot of agencies are quite guilty of that.
I agree with that guilt. I also think that has a possibility of shifting when you have folk around the table that can contextualize those experiences at the same time, right? So two quick examples. One, on the on-calls, I changed the scope where firms could, instead of having to have big firms who could do everything, if you're an expert at public engagement, I might bring you on as an on-call simply because of it.
Mhm.
And so one of my on-calls, who does happen to be an engineering firm, also is an expert in public engagement. And the main reason why I have them on my on-call is because of that expertise, and because of what they can bring to the table. With our $400 million bus rapid transit system that's coming from Somerville to downtown, it's being led by Tri-County Council of Governments, but I sit on the executive committee and was on the selection committee for the team. And one of the biggest conversations was the fact that this is going through Rivers Ave, a place that historically has been left out, and just based on TOD expectations of market values, is going to skyrocket just with the potential of that system.
Right.
The thing that our MPO is doing and is in the midst of doing, specifically because they understand that the public engagement process is going to have to be conscious.
So jargon watch, two terms. Our audience often doesn't have as much familiarity with the term what MPO is and an on-call contract. Could any of you unpack just really briefly what is an MPO and why are they important in terms of distribution of federal dollars?
I'll do the on-call, and then Bev, you can do the MPO.
I'll leave it to Beth to do MPO.
Well, because there's some federal pieces that Secretary Fox attempted to do to try to make that a little bit more seamless. Yeah. But the on-call is essentially, I have a set of firms on a 5-year contract where, at least for our city, some cities it's higher. If there's any project that's below, project study, whatever, that's below $39,999, I can task them to do it without going through an RFP process. Now, it's not a lot of money, but what it does for those firms is it keeps them in the know of everything happening. It keeps the relationship alive. So if you think about who's at the table, who's making decisions, who's able to be in the know, that's a major space and area that folk like to occupy for that, right? And so you do need to have diverse voices a part of it. And so that was something that was a priority for me, to make sure we had minority, women, veteran-owned businesses having a seat at the table and helping us with, whether it's talking to a community member or whether it's putting up a brand new signalized intersection, that they'd be able to be a part of the process.
That's a big deal. When I ran a state agency in California, we had a similar thing called master services agreements, which were 5-year contracts at a certain rate that we could just tap them for contracts that were of a smaller nature. And I think you're absolutely right. It builds up a stable of expertise, and it allows people to get close into what you're working on so that the translation time is less. Let's quickly just turn to MPOs. I know we've discussed it before, but we need to keep reminding our audience what is an MPO and why are they so important?
So decades ago, the notion was people don't travel within jurisdictions. They travel through regions that cross jurisdictional lines. So we created metropolitan planning organizations that were supposed to help represent the travel shed and bring together all the jurisdictions within that. It is tied to the urbanized area, which is any area that grows over about 50,000 people, and is designated by the Census Department. Many of the regions that we're familiar with have multiple MPOs because they have multiple urbanized areas within their boundaries, and that gets away from the original notion that we were supposed to be planning regionally. So some have consolidated systems, and I think the Nashville MPO has something like 12 or 15 counties in it from across the region, but then you'll have areas like in the Tampa region that I think have 4 or 5 MPOs.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's helpful. Thanks, Martha. Do you want to add a little bit here? We're coming up. We're coming up at the end of our time. We've got about 2 or 3 more minutes. Did you want to add what you've been seeing among grassroots activists?
Really, I wanted to ask a question of Keith.
Sure.
Sort of tying back the local and the power that you have, Keith, to hire people, right? Fundamental decisions like that. Given the reality of the budget situation and challenges in your city, if you could change one thing about the federal legislation, what would you do? About the way federal money arrives in your town, in Charleston? What would you fix?
So there's a lot I would fix, but I think I'll try to summarize it into 3 pieces. One is that there's more of a carrot stick situation with design standards. One of the things I mentioned before about one size not fitting all is, for your listeners, South Carolina's 4th in the country amount of roads owned by our state DOT, which means for me as a municipality, just to get a stop sign, I have to go to the state DOT to ask permission if it's on a road that's not mine, right? And those determinations are by whatever their design standards are, not what our preference might be. The other piece is by state legislation, all of the sales tax dollars sit at our counties. So even though we as a city might be contributing the most to that pot of funds, we, like any other municipality in Charleston and Berkeley counties, have to solicit that governing body, collaborate with that governing body to be able to repave the streets in Rosemont, one of the most low-income areas in our city that we were just sidewalking yesterday. And so, and that's despite all the different things we might be dealing with, our 80 days of sunny day flooding and our resiliency issues that we have to manage and figure out how to respond to. And so when we go to those entities and want to collaborate and partner and make things happen in the public right of way, we need to know that progressive design criteria is being prioritized across the board, right? Because at the end of the day, we got to make sure we have safe streets. The prime example I'm gonna just lean into this point and not say the others. The prime example of that is the fact that the safety office at the state level has identified the most dangerous corridors in the state for bike ped. 4 of that top 10 are in the city of Charleston, right? And by federal highway stipulations, you got to do a road safety audit, look at priorities, allocate funds, and otherwise. And what it's done, gratefully, is it's created these pockets of collaboration between the state, county, city, and other stakeholders to make certain things happen. But a part of that process is like the state understands that they have to do that. The federal, like they have to make that happen. That's not necessarily something that's across the board. And because if you take away the 526 widening project, the 2 most pivotal projects in our region have nothing to do with a car. It's our bus rapid transit system, and it's our recent build grant for a $20 million bike ped bridge connecting West Ashley and our downtown. The 2 most pivotal projects in transportation outside of the highway have nothing to do with vehicle level of service, have nothing to do with the traditional design standards about the public right of way. So how do we introduce these opportunities to our streets, knowing that there's an integrated system around design? And you know, obviously I could talk about procurement. I could talk about you know, the how we grade through a lens of equity and all those particular pieces. But on a day-to-day basis, right? If I think about Gaston Green, President Street, and Line Street, 11th most used bus stop in our entire system, 2 schools, a recreation center there. We own Line Street, we don't own President Street. We can't get a stop sign at that intersection.
And I bet you if most citizens do that.
You think about the big things and all that, for me, it's kind of on that day-to-day, what our citizens are experiencing, what makes them safe, what makes them feel like they can choose a mode of transportation or depend on a mode of transportation and know that they're going to be safe. And to me, that really, in terms of the day-to-day work, nixes down to design, and how we're held accountable to that.
So much to unpack, and we definitely want to have you come back if you'll come back. We'd like you to do that because 20 minutes is not enough time to deal with and to talk about and to unpack everything you've talked about. You've given us a gold mine of issues to have future episodes on. As we close it out, we always invite our guests to leave us with something that they're looking at that you want other people to look at, and we'll put it in the show notes. Beth, what would you like to leave us with as parting thoughts?
We didn't touch a lot on what actually came out of the Hill this week, and particularly the Select Committee on Climate. But if you go to our blog, we'll be covering everything there. And we have torn apart the Invest Act, the reauthorization bill, along several lines, including safety and climate and equity, actually on the Smart Growth America blog. So I just invite you to go check it out there.
It's really good. Keith, final thoughts? Something you want us to look at that's in your town that you're excited about?
No, every time I'm given an opportunity to do something in that space, I take this chance. There's a lot of people during this time who have pinged me or been on social media or had conversations about, oh my goodness, there's so much happening and we want to do something. You know, we got this pandemic, we got 2 pandemics going on, we got COVID-19, we have Black Lives Matter, we're trying to figure out what to do. We want to do something. And I would just challenge those who are asking that question to identify the places that they can make space, that they can use their influence, use their privilege to co-empower somebody else to lead, to co-empower somebody else to make a decision, to co-empower somebody else to be able to occupy space. I think we have to graduate from the discussions, we have to graduate from the stakeholder engagements and really think about if we're truly serious about dictating what our communities look like for the better for all, no matter the mode, no matter the background, whatever those things are, then that also means that our decision-making tables, our authority levers, our systematic structures of who's opening those doors is reflective of the very communities that we want to build. And so I think that's beyond important for us to be conscious of. And
that's great. Yeah, that's along the lines of what Martha has been working on with regards to empowering frontline communities to have not only a seat at the table, but in the decision-making process. Do you want to just briefly chat about that, Martha, before we close it out?
I'm involved in several projects as a consultant, and I would just say one of the exciting tools that I've seen recently is Greenlining's mobility equity framework, that I think if people are looking for a place to start of how to really engage communities in articulating what they want, what works for them in their community, I think it's one of the most helpful frameworks that I've seen recently, and pulling it into any project that I'm involved in these days.
We'll put the link to that in the show notes
Yep.
as well. Well, I want to thank everyone for participating. As usual, not enough time, but permanent invitation to Keith to come back, and we want to unpack so much more of what you've brought up. We just scratched the surface. If you like this video, like it, subscribe. We hope you find it useful. Give us your thoughts, and we will see you again soon. Bye-bye. Thank you.